I sued the school that covered up my brother's death. My little brother, Mark, was the kind of person you just expected to win at life, which is why the message I got that Tuesday morning felt like a sick, twisted joke. It was from Blackwood Academy, a place that cost my parents a small fortune but promised perfection, and it was short, cold, and final. Mark had taken his own life. The world stopped turning right there in my cramped apartment kitchen. My name is Alex, and Mark was only 17. My first trip back to our parents' house was a blur of hushed tones and the cloying smell of funeral flowers that hadn't even been ordered yet. My mom was in a kind of silent, catatonic shock, but my dad, a successful lawyer who always valued control, was already managing the narrative. He was the one who went straight to the headmaster, Mr. Harrison, and came back with the official story. Mark was under immense pressure, a sudden wave of depression, and a tragic impulse on a late Sunday night. We were sitting around the mahogany dining table, the one Mark used to doodle on during boring dinners, and that's when the first argument started. "We have to accept it, Alex," Dad said, rubbing his temples, his voice low and tight. "The school handled it as discreetly as possible. We need to focus on his memorial and respecting his decision." I slammed my hand down on the table, making the silverware jump. Respecting his decision? Dad, you know Mark. The kid used to cry if he got a B on a math test. He didn't do anything without planning it out 100 times. He was 2 weeks away from getting his pilot's license. Suicidal people don't spend hours designing a video game concept and then just jump. "Don't you yell at your father, Alex," Mom said faintly, finally speaking, though her eyes were distant. "It's grief. We are all grieving, and Blackwood has been very kind. They even waived the final term's tuition." That line, the waived tuition, felt like a slap in the face. It made me see red. They waived the tuition because they want us to shut up. They want a clean ending. Dad, you're a lawyer, you know a cover-up when you see one. Where's the note? Where are his recent messages? Did they interview his roommates? Did they? We saw the report, Alex. It was thorough, Dad cut in, his voice rising now. You are projecting. You always had a rivalry with Mark, a subtle jealousy because he was the one at Blackwood with a future. Don't ruin his memory by turning this into a witch hunt because you can't handle the truth. That was the lowest blow, and it stung because part of me knew he believed it. I stood up, pushing my chair back. Fine. If you're going to be Blackwood's defense team, I'll be Mark's. I'm going there tomorrow to get his stuff, and I'm going to look at everything. The next day, I drove to Blackwood Academy, a Gothic monstrosity of gray stone nestled in a wealthy forested area. Everything felt too manicured, too quiet. Headmaster Harrison met me in his cavernous, oak-paneled office. He was a tall man with slicked-back silver hair and eyes that looked like they were constantly calculating the value of my suit. "Mr. Davies, a pleasure, though under these tragic circumstances," he murmured, offering a handshake that felt limp. "I'm here for Mark's belongings," I said, not sitting down. "And I want to see where it happened." Harrison frowned. "Alex, I understand your need for closure, but the area is restricted. It's been cleaned, and his belongings have already been boxed up by our staff, a courtesy, of course. Everything is downstairs. I'm not leaving until I see the room myself," and I looked through the boxes in the room, I insisted, leaning over his desk slightly. "If everything is clean and thorough, you have nothing to hide, right?" He sighed dramatically, pulling a master key from a drawer. "Very well, but you will be escorted by Dean Thompson. We must maintain protocols." Dean Thompson, a nervous woman who looked permanently stressed, took me up to the 4th-floor dorms. Mark's room was exactly as I remembered it, small, neat, sterile. A large cardboard box sat in the middle of the floor. As Thompson stood awkwardly by the door, scrolling on her phone, I dug through the box. School sweaters, textbooks, chargers, toiletries, all normal. But then I saw it, tucked inside the lining of a worn backpack. An old, beat-up USB drive, the kind Mark knew how to encrypt so well that it was almost impossible to crack. He'd never leave that behind if he planned to end things. I pocketed it immediately. "Everything looks accounted for," I said, my voice steady. But as I walked towards the door, I noticed something else. Mark was an obsessive cleaner. But behind his desk, there was a small, almost invisible scuff mark on the hardwood, like something heavy had been dragged. And on the window sill, behind a stack of books he never read, someone had tried to wipe away a smear of something dark. It was faint, but I used my thumb and scraped a tiny sample. I left Blackwood that day with the USB drive, a tiny smudge of God knows what, and a conviction that the school was lying. That night, I called my best friend, Ben, who works in digital security. I told him about the drive, the smudge, and the pit in my stomach. "Look, Alex, I know you're hurting," Ben said, his voice hesitant. "But this is Blackwood Academy. They have top-tier lawyers and a reputation to protect. You find one smudge, and you think you've uncovered a conspiracy? Maybe Mark just struggled a little when he fell, maybe he hit his head. He fell, or he jumped, Ben? That's what I need to know. Help me crack this drive." Mark never left anything unguarded unless he wanted it found. There was a long silence on the line. "You're obsessed, man. I don't want to see you destroy your life chasing ghosts. Your dad's right, you need to grieve." "So you're out?" I asked, trying to keep the anger out of my voice. "I can't do this, Alex. It's too big. I'll look at the drive later this week, but if it's locked down the way Mark used to do it, it'll take weeks. Just promise me you won't do anything reckless until I get back to you." I hung up without promising anything. My family was fighting me, my best friend was abandoning me, and the school was stonewalling me. I was completely alone, staring at a small USB drive that might hold the secret to the most terrible tragedy of my life. I spent the next 3 days in a digital bunker, trying every backdoor, every old password Mark and I used to share. Ben was right. Mark had used a military-grade encryption program on the USB drive, but I knew Mark's habits. He always left a breadcrumb. Finally, late on the third night, I remembered an obscure reference he'd made to a movie we loved. The drive unlocked. It wasn't a suicide note. It was a file folder titled, The Blackwood Truth. Inside were detailed journal entries and several grainy video files, mostly filmed on a hidden phone camera. Mark had been investigating a serious violation. Headmaster Harrison was skimming massive amounts of money from the school's endowment, particularly a fund dedicated to athletic scholarships for underprivileged students. The video files showed Harrison meeting with an unknown associate, exchanging briefcases. Mark was going to expose it. The final journal entry was dated Sunday night, just hours before his death. It read, "They know I know. Harrison pulled me into his office tonight. He said if I send the proof, I'll never see my family again. I told him I'm sending it anyway. I'm meeting Sarah at the observatory in the North Wing at 11 p.m. I need a witness. If I don't show, tell Alex to look at the USB." He hadn't intended to die. He had intended to meet an ally. My heart hammered against my ribs. I immediately knew who Sarah was. Mark's study partner, quiet, fiercely intelligent, and terrified of everything. I had to find her before Harrison realized she was the key. I drove back to Blackwood's nearby town, found Sarah's address, and knocked on her door. When she saw me, her eyes were wide, and she looked genuinely skeletal with fear. "Alex, what are you doing here? If the school sees you, they'll expel me," she whispered, pulling me inside her small living room. "Sarah, I know you were meeting Mark at the observatory Sunday night. What happened?" I asked, showing her a printout of the journal entry. She started trembling. I got there, but he wasn't there yet. Mr. Harrison and Dean Thompson were waiting for him. They saw me first. Harrison grabbed me and told me to go straight back to my dorm, or they would make my life a living hell. He said they knew Mark was a nuisance, and that they would handle it. "Did you hear anything? See anything?" I heard a struggle, she choked out, tears finally falling. It was muffled, coming from the roof access hatch above the observatory. Mark and Harrison's voice. Harrison was shouting, "You think you can ruin me, boy?" And then, a sickening, dull thump, but not like a body hitting the ground outside. More like a heavy bag hitting the floor inside. The observatory was unused. It was where the school kept old, heavy telescopes and maintenance equipment, and it had a sheer drop on the outside, but also a metal catwalk inside leading to the dome. I put my hand on her shoulder. Thank you, Sarah. You did the brave thing. The next morning, I confronted Harrison again, but this time I wasn't a grieving brother, I was an investigator. I marched into his office with the USB drive, a copy of Mark's journal entry, and a small, sealed evidence bag containing the dark smudge I'd scraped from the window sill. I know what you did, Mr. Harrison, I said, dumping the items on his expensive desk. He didn't flinch, but his polished facade cracked. He looked like a cornered animal. This is a pathetic attempt at extortion, Alex. That boy was clearly delusional. I'm calling the police. You're trespassing. Call them, I challenge. But tell them this. I have a witness who heard you and Dean Thompson struggling with Mark at the observatory entrance that night. I have Mark's last journal entry, detailing your financial crimes and his planned meeting. And I had this smudge analyzed. It's Mark's blood, mixed with a trace of industrial cleaner used only in the old maintenance closets near the observatory. He wasn't outside. He was inside, where you handled the nuisance. Harrison's face went pale. He finally leaned back, defeated. What do you want? Money? A full scholarship for your kids? Name your price, Alex, and we can make this go away. Blackwood has friends everywhere. You will lose this fight. Mark didn't want money. He wanted the truth, I said, picking up the printouts. And I want justice. I walked out of Blackwood and went straight to the best litigation firm in the state, one that specialized in civil rights and institutional corruption. They took the case immediately. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Blackwood Academy and criminal complaints against Harrison and Thompson, using Mark's digital evidence, Sarah's witness statement, and the forensic report on the blood smudge as the foundation. My father was furious. You are ruining our family name. This will be in the papers, Alex. The shame is covering for a murderer, Dad. The shame is letting him get away with it, I retorted. The fight was brutal, stretching over 2 years. But the evidence was watertight. Harrison tried to flee the country, but the police intercepted him. Dean Thompson flipped on him, confessing that Mark had been pushed during a panicked struggle inside the observatory after he refused to give up the data. They had then tried to make the scene look like an outside fall. The news broke like a tsunami. Blackwood Academy, a bastion of wealth and tradition, was revealed to be a cesspool of corruption and murder. Harrison was indicted. The school was paralyzed by the scandal, facing multiple investigations. We didn't need the settlement money. We just needed them to pay for what they took. And they did. Mark's death was ruled a homicide. The school was shamed, exposed, and eventually forced to close its doors. I look at Mark's picture every day now. The silence of the school's closure is the only peace I've found. I sued the school, and Mark finally got the truth he died trying to expose.